What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite filmmakers' movies and a deeper meaning that they get into in those movies. And this episode's gonna be a good one, guys, because we're continuing our Black History Month theme throughout the month of February, and we're going to be talking about Steve McQueen, the famous director of 12 Years a Slave, but he also did two other films that most people don't really know about, but I'm a big fan of, and I think he's a genius filmmaker. That's right, I said genius filmmaker. Ooh, so we're going to be getting into his films. But before we do that, we're going to be reading your comments from last week's episode. And last week's episode was fire, bro.
we did Black History, Black cinema in general. Yeah, didn't do like the best views, but
it did it.
But I think we did. I think it was great conversation.
Hey, man, I think we learned a lot from you, RB3. I think we learned that you can eventually be a professor of cinematic arts.
Cinematic arts. Now, I don't know about all that, but I have a pretty decent amount of information about old cinema and stuff. And I know for me personally, there's a teacher at USC. There's a dude, Todd Boyd. He's like they call him like the Black Drew Casper. Drew Casper's like the biggest film professor in the world, but he they call him also the notorious PhD. That guy is my big inspiration for a professor because all he does is references like hip hop music, all that kind of shit. If I was ever a professor, we'd be listening to fucking like Kanye all day.
Yeah, but if you were a professor like 40 years from now, it's gonna be like trap dubstep remix. That's what hip hop's gonna be, and it's gonna be like like crazy white people with dreads jumping around. Oh yeah, and you're gonna be talking about Kanye, and they're gonna be looking at you like you're talking about some weird ancient alien.
It's like Kanye.
What is that?
Yeah,
we're listening to super jump trap hip dubstep trip hip hop pop poppity pop, and it's like this weird hip hop mix.
Speaking of hip hop, did you hear that Black Panther?
Oh my gosh, no. So let me tell you. I started it. I'm halfway through it because it's a lot of songs. It's a lot of songs.
14 tracks. Yeah.
I'm about halfway through it, so I'm about 9 or 8 in, and I'm vibing, dude. I'm digging it so much. I don't know what you think about it, but I'm just like I listened to like part of it like in the car and at work. And I was like, "Yo, this is crazy, dude. I'm about to get up out of my chair right now."
Yeah,
because it's dope.
Yeah.
It's dope. It's really good. What do you think?
I mean, I'm gotta be honest, man. I love Black Panther the movie. This album, I'm having a hard time distinguishing what's better between the movie.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, bro. I thought you were gonna say something else.
Oh no. This album's pretty remarkable. I mean, we'll talk about it next because next week we're doing Ryan Coogler as our subject,
and we're talking about Black Panther.
Black Panther full review.
I will eventually see because you've seen it.
Yeah. I know some critics have seen it like twice. Look, I've only seen it once, people. I'm going to be seeing it again. I'm happy with the rest of the.
I would happy to see it once, man. I'd be happy. But yeah, we're gonna be talking about that, and I dig it, man. I think it's cool.
Our album is it's funny too. It doesn't even really play like a movie soundtrack. It plays more as just like a straight up album, and it's really exciting. There's a handful of tracks that are actually in the movie. Most of them aren't, as per expected for any movie soundtrack, I guess. But it's remarkable.
So I saw a clip of because I follow John Boyega on Instagram. I don't know if you do, but he's dope on Instagram. But he was putting a clip of like the London premiere of Black Panther. I think it was London, but they were like blasting that album full blast before playing the movie. Yeah, and everyone was like out of their chairs and like vibing and stuff. And I'm like, yo, that's a premiere.
No. What's that one song in there? Paramedic. The hottest song on that album. And they have like three hot songs back to back. They have Paramedic, Bloody Water, and then King's Dead, which you already heard.
But that's what I listened to. That first half. Those are the back to backs that I got. That's why I'm like, yo, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is like straight up like you're in a club right now. This is crazy.
I'm surprised like Disney even let that like. You know what I mean? Like, cause they rapping about some real like the Bloody Water track with Absol. Like he's rapping about the Ralphs like by like I know where he's rapping about like in Carson and Compton. You know what I mean? I'm like, damn, this is hot right here. You know what I mean? So this is fire.
See, that's why, man. I like letting creativity happen, and I like letting different things happen within studios and systems that are so set in stone, like a Marvel, like a Disney, and they still let something different come up. That's why all the criticism that they get, which some of it is deserved, but in this case, I feel like they're really going for something different. And the more I feel about it, man, because I'm watching a lot of ESPN over the last few weeks because I'm keeping up with basketball like crazy. But the more I like see ads for it and stuff, the more I'm like, yo, this movie's gonna make probably more than what I expected it to make. Probably more than what even you expected it to make.
Yeah,
Because
I made the bold prediction 160 million.
160, and I was with you with 160, but now I'm like, yo, 160 seeming like a little bit.
Yeah,
It's more looking like more 170, 180, 185.
180 is a
Like,
real possibility.
like I'm starting to see like a huge box office. Like I'm talking top 2 of the year box office type thing. But I might be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But I'm excited.
I'm excited for it.
I'm excited because I'm gonna see it this week.
It's definitely grabbing people. I mean, a lot of my friends who don't care about Marvel movies, never seen an MCU movie in the theater, are like, "Yo, we're seeing this."
Oh, dude, I'm
Opening
seeing
weekend,
I'm seeing some people, specifically some people I work with, who are like, do not do like Marvel movies, do not do superhero movies at all, and they're hyped for this movie. So
Yeah.
it's gonna reach a bigger audience than what most Marvel movies do, in my opinion.
Without a doubt, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
with that said, let's read some of your comments, guys, from last week's episode. Once again, we appreciate you comments. Please leave us comments. It's the best way to connect with us. It's the best way to support us. It's the best way to show us what you're thinking and what you're feeling about certain topics or certain directors. We do read your recommendations. And speaking of recommendations, Gabe Schembarger, sorry if I butchered your name, says, "Hey guys, love the show. When are you going to do a Christopher Nolan episode?" The great Christopher Nolan, who's one of my favorite directors working today, if not my favorite director working today. One of them. He's definitely in my top 5 working today. But yeah, when are we doing a Christopher?
Well, you know what? I mean, I don't know if
I mean, he did your favorite movie of that last year.
Dunkirk, yeah. So we've talked about Dunkirk at a pretty good length. You know, I'm kind of thinking, you know, I don't know.
That's going to be a big episode.
Yeah, that's a lot. You know, I don't know. We haven't talked about this off camera, but I was thinking maybe for when Oscar season comes up, that whole month of March, we just cover like all the Oscar nominated directors.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, we've been sleeping on PTA for a while. We've been sleeping on Nolan for a while. Who else is nominated? We already did. Well, Greta
Jordan
Gerwig
Peele and Greta Gerwig.
Yeah, we kind of talked about
Yeah,
them a lot.
because they both have one film.
Only one film, yeah. Who else is nominated?
Guillermo.
We already did
Guillermo.
Yeah, so we could do PTA and then
Nolan after
Nolan,
that.
yeah.
Those are 2 huge episodes.
Yeah.
We could even do both of them for the month, maybe.
Yeah.
Next we have 2-parter for PTA, 2-parter for Nolan.
Yeah.
If you want, I'm game if you're game. Bro.
Yeah. We did, and we have to do an Oscar episode maybe sometime. Predictions.
Oh, that's right. We do have to do that. I don't even know if we want to do that like before or after the Oscars, or maybe before and after the Oscars. That's a good because one for predictions, one for like seeing if we got the predictions right and seeing how the Oscars went.
Right. What comes out the week after the Oscars? Is
like
that
what movie?
Wrinkle in Time. Does Wrinkle in Time come out?
I think Ready Player One. Ready Player One or the Tomb Raider movie, because that comes out on my birthday, which is March 16th.
Oh, okay.
And Tomb Raider comes out March 16th. So I think that's the one. It might be more though.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was gonna say for Wrinkle in Time, hypothetically do Ava DuVernay.
Yeah, we totally can do that.
Yeah.
See, we have too many ideas now.
Yeah. See,
what happened to Nolan and PTA?
This is how like our like episode breakdowns always end up. Like we usually argue throughout the entire week, like trying to figure out like,
and then we always talk about yo, that episode's gonna be huge, and then it gets like no viewer.
Yeah.
Yo, Alexander Payne though.
We thought we should have gone on that.
Yeah, Alexander Payne's the shit.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna love that. Nobody saw it. Nobody saw that. Hey man, it's a great episode.
It's a great episode though, yeah.
Lupe Giustinian or Justinian says, please come back, Steve McQueen. His longtime editor said they've been working on something. I assume Windows recently. Please come back. Yeah, we're talking about Steve McQueen. And he is working on a new movie currently.
He's also doing a Tupac documentary.
That's right, he is. You're right. Yeah. I saw that and I wasn't sure if that came out already, but apparently it hasn't come out. So really cool to see that we're doing him today. Laura, who always longtime supporter, says on Spike Lee, let me just say, if it's not for his film, this one random white girl, I guarantee wouldn't have read the autobiography of Malcolm X. For the pleasure it was in 8th grade, that film had a cultural impact that cannot be measured. Yeah, Malcolm X was interesting because I felt like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King is just such a name that everyone grows up with, but Malcolm X is a little bit more of a, X Factor? What?
No, whoa,
Ooh, whoa!
X.
No, I'm kidding. But he's more of like a guy. He's a little bit more of like an unknown versus a Martin Luther King within outside the African American community. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
outside the African American community, you ask the average person, what did Malcolm X do? Who was he? What did he accomplish? All that. Most people would be like, the Black Panthers guy. Like
Yeah.
most people wouldn't know too much about him.
Well, it's definitely, a lot of people, he was perceived a lot more as like radical, which really he's not. He really advocated for self-defense. A lot of people misinterpret that as advocating for violence. That's not the case. And but yeah, I think that's why a lot of people have a harder time incorporating him into the history. And it's also because his approach early on, before he went to before he did his whole like pilgrimage and like rediscovered himself, you know, before rediscovering himself as a with Islam and everything, he was more like he hated white people a lot more. You know what I mean? Just in his writings and in his speeches and stuff. So. And there's even the scene. I mean, we're gonna talk about Malcolm X and the movie and another time this month. But there's that scene in there where he was on the college campus and like the little the white woman had like came up to him and said, "Oh, I'm a big fan of your stuff. I'm really open to supporting." And then he basically says like, and he basically just shoos her away. Says wait, like what you can help is by like leaving me alone, essentially. And that's the attitude that he had a lot early on in his career. So having him as a director, I mean, sorry, not as a director, but as a public figure, a lot more people had a lot more animosity towards him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's always interesting because you get a lot of introductions of new autobiographical characters like a Malcolm X from a director like Spike Lee. So it's always positive to see. I love directors who can tackle moments in histories that you might not get in other aspects, if that makes any sense.
Right,
I
right.
love people who make movies that are like from a historical perspective, and you can appreciate that coming to life in a different way than from reading it in a book. I guess if that makes sense.
Right.
And I think Spike Lee accomplishes that with Malcolm X for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
Cool. Let's jump into Steve McQueen, who is a British director. He's a director that what's funny? He got his fame through 12 Years a Slave, but I've been a fan of this guy for a while. The one that got me on board with him was Shame, because I saw Shame when it came out, when essentially it came out, and Shame was one that when I first saw that movie, I was floored, because I really did feel like it was such a crazy unraveling of a man spiraling downward within his addiction. And it completely blew me away. Like the style of the filmmaking, the way it was shot, the acting, the long takes, the still takes, all that stuff to me showed me what a great director was. And I didn't even know a lot about him at that point. But to me, Steve McQueen is one of those guys who I really do feel like he's on the come up of making some great films. Because obviously 12 Years a Slave took over the Oscars that year, and it really did accomplish big things. A lot of that was Plan B Productions, obviously, too, kind of promoting Brad Pitt. And but I really do feel like this guy, on a filmmaking standpoint, he's like on another level. And he's a true like come up from the indie world. Like he's a true indie director, taking his indie style into kind of the bigger sphere. But overall, my opinion on the guy is I'm genuinely like a fan of the guy, and I think he's great. I don't know what your opinions are of Steve McQueen.
Yeah, no, I'm similar to you. First time I've heard of any of his movies was Shame. I don't know necessarily got directed was black or that he was.
Me neither. Yeah.
Yeah, and doing 12 Years a Slave obviously put him more on the map, put the face out there more. But yeah, Shame was my first introduction. I remember there was that big controversy when it came out by it being rated NC-17 and by it being this huge. A lot of people said it was like a sex movie and all that kind of stuff. I didn't watch it until like much later when it came on television. But yeah, I mean that movie is very grounded. I mean we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it once we get to it. Yeah.
But it had a very strong sense of style and it had a very like prominent message, which carried over a lot into 12 Years a Slave. And I think it carries on even his work before in Hunger as well. So definitely has a very clear objective in the things that he's trying to say and a very composed style in the way he's telling it. Just speaking on the artistry of his films, the way he shoots, a lot of long takes, a lot of the like making sure the audience is locked in and latched onto whatever's being presented on screen is like a big facet of his. And coming from, I mean, I know he has a background in the art world. So in art, the whole idea of composition and within a frame is very crucial. And I think he brings that a lot to the cinema that he presents.
Yeah,
So,
specifically with the aspect of to me, it's like that it's not just one takes. It's like you just said, like in the art world, it's the ability to capture something within a frame, and that's what he does so well in all his movies. He has so many great like one single static shot, like one shot of just it doesn't move. Kind of like one of my favorite movies of last year, which was A Ghost Story.
Yeah.
A Ghost Story had a lot. It's very indie when you see it, but in indie movies, you just see a shot in a frame that doesn't move. The camera doesn't move for a good like 3, 5, 10 minutes. Like it just doesn't move, and he does that in a ton of his movies. And that's kind of like his MO. That's his style of filmmaking. And again, it's a very indie thing to do because it saves
money.
It saves money.
Yeah.
It really does. It saves money. It saves cuts. It saves edits. It saves a lot because you're just not worried about having to edit around a certain scene because you're just keeping the camera still and then having the actors act around it. And he did that in a lot of his movies. And I love that he keeps his indie style within pretty much all of his movies. And again, obviously, as an indie fan that I am, I appreciate the artistry that he brings into each and every one of his films. And also, obviously, we're going to get into the films, but if you want to see a master class, if you want to see a master example, a master film edit of why I think Michael Fassbender is one of the greatest working actors in Hollywood, watch his 3 films. Hunger, Shame, 12 Years a Slave. All 3 of them, Michael Fassbender is just insane. Like I'm talking like GOAT level. I'm talking like, honestly, I think he's one of the greatest actors alive working today. He's up there with, to me, with what's his name, Daniel Day-Lewis, Gary Oldman. I'm telling you, Michael Fassbender's up there. And if you don't believe me, watch these 3 movies and watch Michael Fassbender develop as an actor from different types of acting, whether it's physical, whether it's just dialogue heavy, whether it's emotional. It's just different aspects of acting. And I feel like his relationship with Steve McQueen, which obviously they have one because they keep doing these movies together, is just absolutely phenomenal. And I think their trilogy of them making 3 movies together is just an example of working, what a director can do to an actor and what an actor can get challenged from a director. I just think it's amazing what he does. And that's why I'm obsessed with Michael Fassbender.
Yeah.
And it's partially because of these movies. Because when Shame came out and I saw Shame, I was like, yo, who's that? That guy's amazing. Like, he's so good in that movie. He like breaks my heart. He gets me mad. He makes me want to kill him, and he makes me want to hug him all at the same time. And I really do feel like that comes a lot from the director. And it's a very realistic style of acting that he brings. But I don't know why you making fun of me, RB3.
No, I'm not making fun of you.
Why? I gush about Michael Fassbender. You gotta laugh at me, RB3.
No. I'm laughing at more the fact, you're talking about your first introduction to Shame.
Yeah.
Being like the profound act. The first thing I thought when I saw Shame, I'm gonna be honest, man. Damn, Michael Fassbender's hung like a motherfucker. Jesus Christ!
Why does everyone gotta go there? Why can't you see the
movie?
movie as like a destruction of a human being?
I know.
And a
It's very
soul.
important,
And the man who's in desperate need of help doesn't get any help.
It's distracting. You know what I mean? It's when you got something that
it is a lot of nudity in that film. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, man.
It is, because they if they did it once, you'd be like, all right, that was, and then they do it again, and you're like, all right, we get it, and then they do it again, and you're like, all right, we get it, man. You don't gotta keep doing that same shot.
Yeah, man. I was like, man.
But they do it over and over again.
Magneto, man. He's really
Magneto is
carrying a pipe down there.
He's one of the most powerful mutants alive, man. That's the reason
that's the
why.
mutation. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But to me, like, I really do feel like watching those 3 films, you see a development within him as an actor, and that's why you got to stop making fun of me, man.
Yeah, I'm not making fun.
You got to stop making fun of me.
Not making fun. No, I mean I 100% agree in terms of Michael Fassbender, and you know, particularly with these 3 films. I mean, Hunger is very like dialogue heavy, whereas Shame is very he's working a lot in silence. So
That's what's so great though, because you
Yeah.
can see his acting. Well, let's get into the movie. Let's start off obviously with Hunger. Hunger came out in 2008. That's crazy. 2008 is like, it gave us a lot of good movies, I guess.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
I didn't see it in 2008. I saw it a few years later. It actually has been a while, but I was rewatching it last night. Hunger's crazy, man. Hunger, basically, the movie's about a 1981 hunger strike that takes place in an Irish prison, and it's always for me. It's always interesting to see the political environment of different nations, because I'm obsessed with
Right.
obviously politics
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But not just American politics, because American politics, I can get into that, how ridiculous, whatever. But it's also like, I've learned a little bit throughout last year and throughout the year before, throughout these past 2 years, especially with Brexit, especially with all that, but specifically with Ireland. How
Right.
many crazy political things have happened in Ireland, from like separations of different Irish states, from like different interpretations of conservatism and liberalism, of Republican, and all this stuff that takes place in Ireland. And it's a very divisive political nation that has a lot of pushback with Britain, obviously. And it's always interesting to see a film about something that's not about where you're from. I don't know if that's what you get too from it, because every
Yeah.
time I see that, I'm like, oh, that's so interesting, because I'm so used to seeing an American perspective that when I see an Irish perspective, it's interesting too. And it's also interesting coming from a director like Steve McQueen,
Right.
jumping into the Irish world.
He's British, I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, he's from London.
So he's from London.
Yeah.
But he's taking on like this Irish story. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think this movie's fascinating. They don't really dive too deep into the politics of the whole situation. It's really more focused on the situation of these prisoners.
And let me just say that everyone says that 12 Years a Slave is hard to watch. This movie is hard. This movie is
yeah.
gross. This movie is like, it's hard to watch on a scale of like, what is that?
Yeah. I mean, like,
what are they
first-
touching? Oh,
In the first shots is like them like rinsing down a bunch of shit. from,
yeah.
like,
Or the guy even walking into that cell, and
Yeah,
you're just
yeah.
like, you don't know what is like. It's all like gross inside stuff, and they make it look so real that you're just like, I feel like I'm gonna throw up watching this
Yeah,
movie.
yeah,
It
yeah.
makes you kind of, and it, like, there's other scenes as well that make you feel like this is a gross out movie. If you're queasy in any way, you cannot. I barely got through it in the sense
Yeah.
of like how gross it was. This one's hard to watch.
For a movie called Hunger, it sure does like take away your appetite.
Yeah, it really does, man. But speaking of that, the title of the movie, it's essentially a hunger strike that takes place within a prison, and Michael Fassbender is the leader of that hunger strike. And Michael Fassbender, if you want to talk about physical transformation performances, Michael Fassbender, I've heard before from Tom Hardy and stuff that when he was in school with Michael, that Michael was super method. Like, he would actually like take like months at a time if he was playing like a cripple and just live in a wheelchair for like 6 months, 8 months, or if he was playing something else, do that. I totally believe that Michael Fassbender did not eat anything while making this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because he looked like he hasn't eaten anything, and it's not like that crazy like CGI stuff that they do nowadays, like they
Yeah.
did with PETA in the Hunger Games movie.
Oh, right.
You know that
right,
when they make him
yeah.
super skinny?
Yeah.
This is that without the CGI. Like, he really physically destroys himself in this movie. And it's not, part of it is like the skinniness of it and the malnutrition, but part of it too is like the physicality of it. Like, when they're beating on him, that
Yeah.
looks,
That's a gruesome scene.
that looks
Yeah.
that looks real. That looks like they actually were like, hey, how about let's just beat him up?
yeah,
And then he'll act and pretend he's getting. No, it's like, no, let's just beat the crap out of Michael Fassbender, so it can be even better acting.
Right.
Because when they're drowning him in the tub and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
it's like, dude, that looks like they're doing it.
Yeah.
Like, he really gives a performance where realism is something that Steve McQueen really wanted to accomplish with this movie, because it feels real. It feels almost real, like documentary style real, where you really do feel like this is some gross, terrible stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah.
And it's disturbing, but it's essentially, the purpose of it is to show how far. Like, to me, my favorite part of the movie is the conversation, that one-shot conversation that he has with Liam Cunningham, who plays Sir Davos Seaworth of Game of Thrones. Shout out to Sir Davos.
Hey.
But that one shot when he's having the conversation with the priest, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And it's all dialogue,
Yeah,
and
just
it's
that
just
one
one
long
long
take.
take.
Yeah.
Just
17 minutes.
non-moving camera. Yeah, is it 17 minutes?
I think it's like 17
Oh,
minutes,
that's
yeah.
crazy. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, that to me is like amazing. Just back and forth dialogue, them introducing each other, getting to know each other, then talking about the political atmosphere, talking about the human body, talking about his life, talking about where he's come from. Like you get an entire life story out of that one scene. And it's all acting, and it's all dialogue, and it's all just Michael Fassbender and Liam just going back and forth.
Yeah.
And that to me is just like that's the most fascinating aspect to me. Besides the whole like, he hasn't eaten and he's super hungry and this is crazy and it's kind of gross.
Right.
I don't know what you
right.
think overall, but
No, no. I mean, I completely agree with your sentiment. I think, particularly going back to that beating scene, as kind of like a theme and of all of McQueen's movies, like the showing you some violence, but then giving you the rest in like implied violence too. I think that movie really highlights that, and I think the whole idea of isolation is a key when it's particularly in this film. When talking about like the isolation in the prison, even though you have a roommate, how still lonely and visceral that is. Just like overall, the whole notion of capturing incarceration, whether that be in Ireland or in London, England, or in America, like the whole incarceration cycle, this kind of highlights how brutal that is, particularly during this time.
yeah.
So I think when they show you all of that, just nothing but more justifies the need for a change. And obviously the guy's like a Irish Republican or whatever, so he comes up and like tries to fight for the hunger crisis happening in the prisons. I don't know. It's just overall it's super fascinating to see this kind of perspective given on something else, like you said, outside of the U.S.
Yeah, for me too, it's also about the filmmaking that he uses in this movie. It's super quiet.
Yeah.
Besides that one scene we talked about, there's hardly any dialogue
Yeah.
within this movie. A lot of it is just acting in the sense of, like you said, isolation.
Yeah.
And how that feels and how that sounds like. There's even moments where the sound is taken out of the movie, where he takes out sound in the movie. And it just shows you very long takes, very still shots.
Yeah.
The camera movement is very minimal in this movie.
Right.
There's even a shot where a guy's walking down a hallway, and as he turns and makes his way and he darts towards the other hallway, the camera is too slow to catch up to him, so it's slowly making its way down.
Yeah.
And then it just turns, and it's a super slow turn. I don't know if you know the shot I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
no,
It's
yeah.
near the beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
but that is kind of like super Steve McQueen style, making it super very long, deliberately slow, drawn out,
Yeah.
still quiet moments in all of his movies.
Oh, yeah.
But specifically with this movie, especially because it's again a smaller movie. It's an indie movie, so he
Right.
wants to make it as efficient as possible and take in everything that he's made in the movie and make every shot worth it, matter, have weight to it. Kind of thing. I don't know if you've captured that as well as far as filmmaking style.
Yeah, no, and I think particularly in his use of long takes, like I said in the beginning, it really asks the audience to really pay attention and draw into like every specific detail. And a lot of times when you're using long takes, and a lot of times these long takes are wide shots. So sometimes you'll see long takes being like close-ups or tracking shots. All this, no, his are very long, very wide takes that you're really moistening in. And a lot of times in film theory, the idea of when you're shooting long takes, the audience perceives the time being longer and more drawn out because there's more for the eye to like look for and stuff. But so that's why. But in the same sense, it also makes it go quicker because you're trying to capture as much information as possible, so your brain's thinking at like a faster rate. So it's kind of a mixture of both, and then in using this film, he kind of mixes both. In this film and in all of his films, he mixes both the the faster pacing of the processing of information by filling the scene with a lot of background information and foreground information, but also makes it feel really long and drawn out by the lack of action a lot of times, particularly in Hunger. There's, I mean, that hallway scene you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially you're lingering on somebody like mopping a hallway for there's that one section of the film for like 3 minutes. Like,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like that kind of lingering. It makes you feel anxious
And
like,
it makes you feel tense.
Yeah, it makes you want to escape the situation. Same way that these prisoners want to escape being incarcerated. So I think the filmmaking style really incorporates the inner psychological turmoil that these characters are facing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, what I like about Steve McQueen is that every single one of his movies are essentially about not just about it's about a man and how far they're willing to go, how far they've gone, and just how much the human spirit and how much turmoil a man can deal with. We see that in Hunger, we see that in Shame, and we see that in 12 Years a Slave. And I love that that's his running theme. His
Right.
running theme is overcoming situations or failure to overcome situations that are so daunting and so larger than life and so enormous. And that's essentially what this movie's about with the hunger strike that he's going on. Attempting, like again, he explains it in that scene. I love that scene because he really,
Right.
he talks about his childhood and he talks about when he was pushed to the limit and how everyone, his name is Bobby Sands, how everyone as a child were debating what to do with this injured guy. I think that fell down
Right.
that fell down a creek, I think is what it was. And while everyone is debating this, he said that all the kids were debating what to do with this injured guy and if they should kill him or if they should try and save him. And he said that the attempted leaders or the people who consider themselves leaders were talking and talking while this guy was dying. And instead of just waiting for them to finish their conversation, I took the ownership and the leadership, and I killed the guy by drowning him. And in that sense, everyone declared me the leader because they saw how far I'm willing to go. And then after that, he says, "You don't get it. Like, that's how far I'm willing to go. Like, if I showed that as a kid, imagine what I can do as a man." And that's kind of all the themes that McQueen has in all his films. It's like how far a man is willing to go or how far a man has come and he can't overcome it. Right? So that's what I love about this movie because it's essentially it's about the physical torture because there's also that scene where they're explaining what a human being goes through when they're going through. Can you imagine dying of hunger? Like what a
Yeah.
human being goes through when they die of hunger. Like the most disgusting way to die. Like just not eating anything. Your body just literally eats itself.
Yeah.
Eats itself, essentially. It deteriorates to a point where it's a slow, excruciating death. And that's how far this guy is willing to go to lead this movement, to lead this strike, and to lead his political perspective. And that's essentially what all Steve McQueen's films are about, is about the human spirit and the human soul and a man's strength or lack of strength to overcome a certain issue. And I love that seeing that in Hunger because that explains it a lot better than the first half of the movie where you're just grossed out.
Right.
Because when you're grossed out, you're like, what's the point of this? It's so gross. You're like, no, I was eating. But for me, that to me is what Steve McQueen delivers in all his movies. Just one central person tackling something that's bigger than them and their ability to tackle it, and just that battle, that inner battle that takes place.
Yeah, no, I think the contrast of the internal versus external lives and personalities is definitely an overlap into a lot of his characters that he portrays in his films. I mean, when you're talking about something like Hunger, he obviously has an agenda that he wants to push and he wants to overcome and have and liberate these prisoners, but at the same sense, he is more of a self-serving exercise to see if he can overcome his isolation, overcome his own like inner struggle to finding and rediscovering his place in this prison and the overall larger political cycle that's happening. So I think that's really impactful and powerful. I mean, you talk about the idea of leadership in this, and I think that's also another prevalent theme in this. So just overall,
I love that line, dude. That
Yeah.
line where he said, like, when everyone is debating on what to do, debating about what to do when it comes to life or death situations, that situation that you're debating might leave your hands. And I thought that was so interesting because I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. It's like you find I know this is an example, but I'm taking it from the movie, is that someone on the brink of death, and you're debating what to do with their life instead of just taking an initiative, because if you're too busy debating something, maybe that choice will be taken from your hands and they'll just
Right.
die on their own.
Right.
Instead of just taking the initiative of saying, no, we're going to save him, or no, we're not going to save him. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of leadership that he really brought about. But yeah, anything else on Hunger before we move on to Shame?
I'm not. I mean, that's it on Hunger. It's a great film, great introduction
Yeah,
to
if you're not queasy at all, we recommend watching it. If you're fond of Michael Fassbender, we recommend watching it because again, it's not for the faint of heart.
No, absolutely
I'm
not.
telling you, man. I saw 12 Years a Slave. 12 Years a Slave is hard to watch, but I was like, this one's just gross.
Yeah,
This one's
yeah.
really hard to watch. But let's move on to Shame because Shame is one to me that I'm telling you, man. When I saw this movie, and I've said it a million times, but I'll say it again, I was blown the F away. Like I was just like, what is this? This is insane. Because I really did expect if I pitch you this movie, or if I give you the log line of this movie, it sounds kind of comedic. It's like a sex addict is struggling to have too many sex with too many women, and you're like, okay, that sounds ridiculous. That sounds like
Yeah.
almost like a comedy.
Yeah.
And what you get is one of the darkest movies
Yeah.
that you'll see. It's such a dark movie because when you hear the term sex addict, it sounds comical and it sounds kind of goofy and it sounds something that's not real or something that you're like, that's not real. That's just a guy who loves, having sex with girls. And it's like, no, a true sex addict is someone who's in so much despair because they literally can't see anything past their addiction or their feed to fill their addiction. They can't commit to helping their family. They can't commit to work. They can't do anything in their life because they're so addicted. And addiction in any aspect is going to destroy you no matter what it is, whether it be a drug or whether it be sex. And this guy his name is Brandon in the movie, dealing with being addicted to sex to a point of complete and utter destruction of his life and the life of everyone around him. And that to me is what Steve McQueen delivered in this movie. And it's very raw, it's very real because again, it's a lot of long shots, a lot of long takes, a lot of it seemed there's some moments specifically with the date scene, the date scene that takes place.
Yeah.
That seemed almost, I might be wrong, and I'm probably wrong, but that seemed almost improv. That seemed almost like so natural to the point that I'm just like, I'm sure that he just left the camera on. And he's like, talk, you're on a date. And he's like, what do you think? Oh, I don't know. Cool. So what do you like to do? Like it seems so natural to the point that I feel like he has such a sixth sense with Michael Fassbender that he knows what he wants him to say at certain moments. But I'm telling you, man, when it comes to acting as well, his performance in this movie is what truly shows you how amazing Michael Fassbender can be with different levels of emotions, with hiding emotions, with desperation, with feeling inner turmoil and how you emote inner turmoil. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you're dealing with something that's inside of you and you don't want to say it out loud, how do you express that on camera? And he expresses it to the times 10 on this movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely Michael Fassbender is the standout here, and that's not to mention Michelle Williams. Playing his sister.
She's so good.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that to me, she Mike Fassbender is obviously a main character, but Michelle Williams is almost like the focal point of what's happening in these events, because what it really is, I think with Fassbender's character, he's dealing with another theme of like isolation and being alone, and the movie's called Shame, so it's literally about him being ashamed of his addiction. He's ashamed of being a sex addict, and but that's what fills him. But when Michelle Williams comes into the picture, it's almost kind of like a sigh of relief. Like he might be able to be onto something that can help him and can fix him. But ultimately, and we learn that she falls victim to her own kind of form of not necessarily addiction for sex, but addiction for attention. Right? She is really focused and motivated by people wanting to love her and desire her, and that. And the fact that she goes to her brother to look for that is important, and I think that's why when we first meet the first time those two interact, that whole scene takes place in the mirror. So it's like a whole like idea of like self-reflection. They're essentially the same person with battling different demons. So I think that the movie overall conquers and challenges a lot of our conventional ideologies when it comes to like sex and addiction to sex and nymphomaniacy, and but just overall how the the addiction to attention and the addiction to desire is almost just as prevalent and damaging too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there's certain scenes in this movie that really stand out to me. One of them is the scene where Michelle Williams is hooking up with his boss in the next room,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he's going insane.
yeah,
He's just losing his shit,
yeah,
and you could see him kind of just like the ability to just go through so much, like you don't know what to do. You're so pissed. You're having a million emotions. Part of your emotions is to feed your addiction. Part of your
yeah,
emotions is you're angry at your sister for even being there.
yeah.
Part of your emotions is that it's crossing over with your work life.
Right.
And all these emotions are going inside Brandon's head to the point where he's just like, damn it, I just need to run. And he just goes
Yeah.
on a run.
That's what I mean. That's him confronting his addiction for the first time. How his sex addiction is like him seeing that being portrayed in his sister, which is really heartbreaking. I know there's that whole theory online that Michael Fassbender's character, what's his name?
Brandon.
Brandon, yeah, Brandon, and what's the sister's name? I can't even remember her name.
Oh, I
either.
forget her name in the movie.
But like the whole theory is that they both come from a cycle of abuse from each of their parents in different ways, and then that's why they're both like that to each other. Or there's another theory that maybe when when the sister was young, Brandon's character was like abusive to her. That's why she's so clingy. I don't know. These theories are just theories, but it's hard to like circumcise that with like facts from the movie. But it's just interesting to think that their past cycles of abuse and matriculate into how they are as people now. So
Yeah, but what I like too is the fact that we see someone dealing with a difficult moment in addiction, and he expresses that form in the form of running. And obviously, who's a runner, I love seeing that on screen because that's another long take, right? That's a
yeah,
good 5 minutes, just him running for 5 minutes, and even him waiting for the cars to drive
yeah,
by, and he's still running, and he's
yeah,
just in a moment where I love the score in that scene too, because the score is very like precious and beautiful, but
yeah,
also kind of
classical.
classical, but also
Yeah,
kind of disturbing, some stuff that's going on in his mind, and him just expressing that form and that frustration and venting it in the form of another physical aspect, which is running, which is the most difficult thing you can do in
right.
athletics. And it's such a interesting thing where it's literally taking the edge off by putting your physical body in a difficult position, which is obviously the form of running. I just love, I mean, to me it's just so fascinating because it's so true and it's so real and it's so raw that when you can't deal with something, you try to get away from it, and you're literally running away from something, physically running away from it and emotionally running away from it. So
Right,
that scene
right,
to me
right,
is just like Steve McQueen going ham, like just
right.
bawling and showing off. So I love that moment for sure. And one of the things for me, obviously, that stands out in this movie is the spiral. And what I mean by the spiral is that the scene where he talks to his sister, and I don't want to spoil it in case you guys want to see it, but there's a scene where he has a fight with his sister, and when she tells him the concept of family, you know what I'm talking about? When she kind of explains to him, like, you're my brother, you're supposed to look after me, you're supposed to give me what I want because you're my brother, you're literally my family.
Right.
And he says, that's not what the expectation should be. The expectation should be to be a better person and to give me what I want, and then you give me what you want. Kind of the thing like give and take
Right.
versus just take. And he kind of just tells her that you're just a taker. You just take anything you want. And then after that fight, he slowly starts to spiral because here's a guy who lives his life with no connection and no relationship. And
Right.
with this idea of no marriage, no relationship, just pure sex. Everything is sexual to him.
Right.
So what is going to happen to a point? What is going to happen to a man who doesn't see relationships as beneficial to him when it comes to your sister, someone you literally can't have sex with
Yeah.
because it's your sister?
Right.
You can't. Here's a non-emotional guy, a guy who doesn't feel any emotion, and he needs the sexual advance in order to get something from someone. So when his sister comes into his life, he doesn't see a purpose for her. So he pushes her away, and it kind of destroys his mind because he feels like, well, she's my sister, but I don't care. But she's my sister, and it's this weird back and forth battle that he has of like, what do I do with someone that should have a relationship but don't have a relationship with. And it spirals into the whole like looking for the prostitutions and getting into that ring, and
Right,
then
right.
pushing his sister away, ignoring her for like a day or two when he just disappears and he just goes ham.
Right.
Remember that last, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like the
Yeah.
last 20 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah.
To the point that it literally like destroys her sister. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where he starts to realize like his actions have consequences.
Right. No, I think that's prevalent and an important piece of this movie is understanding how the relationship that he has with his sis is what he longs for. I guess. Well, not what he longs for is what he longs against. Like what he doesn't really want. He wants, like you said, just frivolous sex. He wants, to just be hook up with whatever and just leave him to the side. But I think when his sister starts to come in and challenge and make him stretch outside of his comfort zone, that's when like he starts to push his away.
He snaps. He
Yeah.
basically snaps because he doesn't know how to respond to that.
Right.
Because he doesn't know how to have an emotional relationship. He only knows how to have a physical relationship.
Right.
So when someone that he can't have a physical relationship with comes into his life, he's like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
I just literally just want to get rid of you.
Right, and then, but it's also, I mean, she's also a very damaged
Sure.
individual too, and her whole thing is not being able to understand that being dependent on other people is not necessarily a good thing. She's so dependent on everybody else, where she doesn't know how to drive, she doesn't have a place to stay, she's messy, and I think that's another thing. She's so messy and unorganized and still out there. Whereas even though Brandon's a sex addict, he's also very OCD. So he keeps his place very clean. He's very like organized and all that shit. So their clashing of personalities really leads to something. That's the central conflict. I think that's this entire story, and the fact that he has to confront that constantly throughout, and while confronting himself about what he feels shameful of. And ultimately, it's just like a cycle. No matter how close he is to being fixed, and no matter how close he is to developing an actual relationship with his sister, is always just going to devolve back into what he's addicted to. So it's very problematic and very sensitive subject material they're dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. I'll finish up by saying the thing that stands out the most to me is the final shot of the movie. The final shot of the movie when he's walking towards the camera in the rain, and he breaks down. That to me is like a master class of acting, like just straight up master class. When you see the every bit of emotion, everything that he was keeping inside of himself, just slowly come to the surface to the point of just complete and utter, just like you haven't cried like that since you were a baby. Like he just literally breaks down so much, where he's slowly just breaking and realizing everything that he's done or failed to do, and it just comes out in a very slow, destruction of himself in the inside, where he just feels all these emotions bubble up to the surface, and then he just breaks down and just like hysterically crying, just hysterically. When you see Michael Fassbender cry like a baby, it breaks your heart. You're straight up like, yo, damn, that hurts. Because you feel that level of acting and that type of emotion that he gets is just so raw and so real that it really goes to show what Steve McQueen has to do to get these kind of performances from people. Because think about it, all three of his movies, man, he gets Oscar level performances from every one of his actors. I think Fassbender's Oscar level in this. I even think Michelle Williams is Oscar level in this movie. And same with Hunger, and obviously 12 Years a Slave, because it did give some Oscar level performances, Oscar wins for people. So for me, it's always the main purpose of every director in every single one of his movies isn't the shots, isn't the style. It's always about the actor's performance. And the fact that Michael Fassbender pops like a freaking bubble in this movie of emotion just shows how good Steve and Michael work together.
Right. No, yeah, without a doubt, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this is like how matched the performances are to each other, and how he's able to play like this duality of hiding his private life, but also trying to maintain and uphold like this public perception of himself that he keeps holding on to, and how those two kind of clash, and how his sister manages and helps him kind of break that line down, but also still builds a wall in between it in almost a way. It's like a simultaneous thing. So it's just fascinating how they approach all of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Let's move on to 12 Years a Slave. 12 Years a Slave obviously is a movie that essentially made Steve McQueen a household name as far as the director goes. It also gave a lot of actors their come up, specifically Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah.
You could also make an argument for Chiwetel Ejiofor. I mean, obviously
He was in the business for a long
he was in a
time.
business for a long time. I knew him
Yeah.
mainly from Serenity.
Serenity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like the cool guy from Serenity.
I knew him from Children of Men.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
But essentially, 12 Years a Slave was this kind of it kind of swept the Oscars that year. Do you know like what wins did it take?
Yeah,
'Cause
it won Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Supporting Actress with Lupita Nyong'o, and I think Best Editing or something like that.
did Chiwetel win for that?
No, he didn't. No,
Okay.
that was the who I think that was Leo. Was Leo nominated? No, that wasn't Leo's win.
This was 2014.
2014, 20 or yeah,
It
2013.
came out 2013, but the
But
2014 Oscars.
Yeah, I think his three Oscar wins were Best Supporting Actress, Best Picture, and Best Adapted Screenplay. That was also the year Gravity came out. So Gravity took a lot of the technical Oscars, including Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Visual Effects, Best Editing, Best Cinematography, all that stuff. But like when in terms of
Matthew McConaughey, I think. It
oh,
was.
for Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, Chiwetel Ejiofor brought something special to this role, and I think overall this movie had a real impactful like look at American slavery and how. And I think the biggest reason this movie's successful, honestly, is and maybe is speaking candidly or whatever, but I think part of why a lot of people found relation to this outside of like the black community is because of the idea of it starting off with a dude who was already free and being kidnapped and going into slavery. You know what I mean? A lot of slave stories we are most familiar with are slave stories of people who were born in slavery or just are taken over to the ships. This is a dude who lived a free life, and they show you the free life up front, and then that taken away from him. Honestly, I think that's the biggest fear for a lot of people is like being recued back into a system of slavery and in a lot of cases indentured servitude, but mostly slavery in the context of this movie. So
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's why I connected with a lot of people.
Yeah, it's the concept of like how you can move to one part of the United States and it's a completely different world to another part of the United States, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole idea of like a black person in this New York area is like whatever, and a black person in the South is automatically just a slave.
Right.
Like
right.
you're a slave or you're a runaway slave, but you're still a slave.
Right.
Where free people didn't exist in the South and there during that time. It was only in the North.
Yeah.
So that whole idea of like literally two different worlds of what one perception can be of a person, which is a black person in this
Right.
case. I mean, that's just insane. That's
Yeah.
insane. How ingrained in hardcore racism the South was to the point that there was no such thing as a free black person. Is like, you're kidding, right? That doesn't exist.
Right.
Like,
Right.
that's
Right.
ridiculous.
Right, no, and I think that's part of the reason why that Chiwetel Ejiofor brings like a different type of performance to this than we see in a lot of slave movies. A lot of times, slaves are portrayed as like uneducated, unable to read, unable to do all this. He comes off as very educated and very knowledgeable and very able to speak to the same level as his masters and the owners. To which that's not a portrayal we see a lot in the media. A lot of times, if somebody's speaking up to their master or their owner or whatever in a slave movie, it's immediate like beating. But he kind of swoon talks a lot of the people around him, and like with Michael Fassbender's character or Paul Dano early on in the movie, he had that like big fight with, but ultimately that led to him being like hung at the end of like that chapter of that story.
Sure.
But it's just like it's crazy to see how and maybe this is where a lot of people criticize the movie of how portraying this dude in such an intellectual way and how he's able to like escape in the end through his being able to like talk to the Brad Pitt character and like give him a full understanding of his freedom and all that stuff. So it was interesting how this, in comparison to like other slave movies, has like almost a different kind of spin on it in a way, but also still goes really harsh in the brutality of like of slavery in the American South.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about a little bit of what the controversial perspective was on this movie, or the counter perspective was on this movie when it comes to the white person, right? Because it's that concept of like, if it wasn't for the good white guy, he probably wouldn't have gotten his freedom. If it wasn't for Brad Pitt's character of being like the progressive white guy who's like, I think black people are cool. They shouldn't be slaves at all. And then he kind of tells him his story, and he's like, all right, I'll help you out, man. And if it wasn't for him, he'd still be a slave probably. And that's kind of like the white savior kind of. That was a criticism,
that's
right?
one of the big criticisms for it. And I think that's.
What do you think of that though?
I mean,
because I want RB3's perspective.
I mean, I don't know the exact full history of the circumstances.
That's the other
Solomon
point too, because
Northrup,
it's a true story.
Yeah.
So it's hard to criticize a true story when it's like, no, that's what happened.
So I don't know if that happened in the true story. Though. So if that did, it's like, okay, they're just telling a story. But then there's also criticism of like other historical inaccuracies too. But I think to me, the one of the big criticism that comes out of this movie, and I think it's probably the one that I'm a little more iffy on in terms of like agreeing or disagreeing, is with the whole idea of a British director and British actors coming in and doing a movie about American slavery and having that be like the flagship slave movie, right? The best picture winner and all that stuff. Meanwhile, where there's movies like Roots, I don't know if Roots was directed by a black guy or not, but I don't think it is. But that's more. I think for a lot of people, I mean, I guess people growing up in that generation of seeing Roots on TV, that's for a lot of people the more definitive tell of racism, given that it's like so drawn out and like long and all that stuff.
Well, isn't Roots a show though?
Yeah, it's a show. Yeah. So, but
it's slightly different than a movie.
Well, miniseries. But in terms of showing slavery in a media standpoint, I think that's where a lot of people. Whereas 12 Years a Slave has more of like I feel like a crossover appeal, where it's able to reach a lot more people. I think it's a brilliant movie, but I mean, I'm speaking
more people in what sense?
More people, more white people. You know what I mean?
You don't think Roots reached a lot of white people?
It did, but it doesn't.
Because I think it did.
It did, but I definitely think it. Let's put it this way: what other like slave movie really got the same kind of Oscar attention besides Django and besides like 12 Years a Slave? There's not really a lot.
Not a lot. No.
Yeah. So, but in terms of,
but you gotta realize too. But there's not a lot of slave movies, or there's not a lot of movies in general that got Oscar attention from a black director in general.
Yeah.
But the fact that it does come from a black director is rare within itself.
Right. Well, that's a lot of people's criticism of it, is that it's a black British guy who's not from America, who doesn't have the same history with slavery, and considering like England's place in the triangular slave trade, it comes off as problematic. Now, I don't have a problem with it necessarily. And I think this movie's brilliant, but I'm just kind of saying how some people have problems with that fact.
Sure.
That being said, though, I think it's a harsh reality of slavery, and the way it portrays that is probably the more the greater part of this discussion, because even though it's not an American director and not American stars, it still overall highlights how gruesome and how brutal slavery is, and it kind of puts audiences in the backseat of that.
I want to hear you more about that, man. Because for me, I'm not black, so I can't really say much about it. So, but I've always found that fascinating, because I've talked to a buddy of mine. His name is Jarvis, and he was in the Walking Dead video that I did a reaction of with Glenn, dying in the Walking Dead. But I've always talked about that, because for me, I don't understand it, because for me, Daniel Kaluuya, right? Think of Daniel Kaluuya in Get Out. He's in the biggest movie right now that's going on in the Oscars. And that's Get Out. He's a British guy. Chiwetel Ejiofor, Idris Elba, all these British black guys. The guy from The Wire that I always forget his name. He's British too. There's also the girl who's playing, or the girl who played Shuri in the Black Panther.
Letitia Wright.
Letitia Wright. She's British.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking of Black Panther recently, and I was thinking about John Boyega. John Boyega, who's a British black guy too. And I saw his Instagram, and I was watching all these British black guys come out. They're straight up like David Oyelowo, like another one. Like, there's a lot of British black actors, and I feel like they they feel like they have a place too because they're still black. I mean, it's not like there's no racism in England. I mean, England is pretty racist.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crazy white people there that think,
Yeah.
that they're pure blood white super Aryan race type racism, like high level type
Right.
racism there too. So it's not like there's no such thing as racism there, and it's not like there's, this is my perspective, right? My perspective is that black is black, right? I also come from the Latino perspective too, and there's a lot of black Latinos, and I feel like black Latinos get a lot of shade, unnecessary shade, to the point that they feel like it's always this self-identification thing where it's like, well, what are you, Latino or black? And it's like, I'm both, you idiot. Like, why can't I be both? Like, I don't get
Yeah.
that. I'm black and I'm Latino. There's slave ships that went to freaking Latin America too, man.
Yeah.
Like that's still a part of culture, and just because people can be two things, black and British, black and Latino, it doesn't have to necessarily be black and American, right? I mean, that's my perspective on it, because to me, discrimination is discrimination. And although, America has a bigger, wider history with it, because America is legitimately bigger and wider. Like, it's such a big country that's why so much has gone down here. But I do feel like there's other countries that can face similar shit or face different type of shit
Yeah.
when it comes to racism or when it comes to being black, right?
Right.
Because there's countries like the Dominican Republic, which is black, mainly black, which is
Yeah.
like 85% black.
Yeah.
And white is the lower, or like Puerto Rico, which is like 60-40 black.
Or Haiti or something like
Huh?
that. Or like Haiti too.
Or Haiti, right?
Yeah.
Because that, I don't know. To me, it becomes difficult when people start shunning other people because they're from other countries.
Right.
That's my perspective, though. When you're just like, wait, you're black, but you're Haitian, or you're black, but you're Puerto Rican, and it's like, well, really? I mean, they're still black.
Yeah.
That's I don't know. That's me. That's my 10 cents.
No. I mean, I'm with you on that. And I think that's, I think the African American or the African experience in just in general countries is almost universal because of the long history of slavery in the world, not just in the United States. But that being said, I mean, particularly with speaking on something like 12 Years a Slave, that's so distinctly American, and that's so about American slavery, having a British voice kind of come in and doing his spin on that. A lot of people see that as problematic. Again, I don't have a problem with that, but I think that's where the discrepancy of having
Would they prefer it if it was a white American?
no, and I think that's where I kind of fall. It's just like, would you rather see
Because I don't get that. Like,
Well-
white people do it, and it's like, it's cool.
Well, but then these are the same people who have problems with Tarantino doing Django, or people who would have problems with the guy who did The Help. I don't know what the guy's
I
name
don't know
is.
his name, yeah.
But another white homie doing something like that, as opposed to and again, maybe not American African American directors are having the same opportunities to do these kinds of movies. But if you have somebody who's American doing something like 12 Years a Slave, how different would that be stylistically, and how different would that portrayal be, and how distinct and how the distinct American experience influences the difference in our portrayal in exile and slavery. Now, for me, I don't really like seeing slave movies at all. Not because they're too gruesome or anything. I just think that's a lazy way of making a black movie.
Sure.
And
And we've talked about that before, right?
yeah, in our last episode, yeah. I think in the case of 12 Years a Slave, I think this is almost kind of, to me, it's almost like a definitive portrayal of slavery, because it shows like the contrast between freedom and being
Slavery,
enslaved.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and to me, I think that's why the popularity is there, because it will show, like, for example, a free white person, how it would be to have that taken away from you and being put into slavery, and how that would, I think that's why it connects for a lot of other people. And I think that's why Steve McQueen made that story. When he was originally putting together this story, he wanted to tell the story of an American dude who was free but then kidnapped, but he didn't know that it was like based on a true story. So like his wife brought him the autobiography of Solomon Northrop, and he read that and ultimately adapted that into the screenplay. But in terms of like addressing, listen, I know that's a problem that a lot of people have, not just in the black community, but just in America in general, is the idea of like British actors playing American parts. Samuel Jackson spoke out against that. I know
Yeah,
some
and
time
Daniel
ago.
countered him, and I think Daniel's counter was pretty solid, though.
Yeah, yeah. I
I don't
mean,
know if you saw Daniel's counter.
yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah, and I mean, I agree. But I also think that there is something to be said about the distinctly American experience being played into parts that are distinctly American. But I think in the case of 12 Years a Slave, that's not really a problem. And I think that having and 12 Years a Slave mixes up a lot of the cast, right? It's not like all the cast is British, is it? Like,
No,
no.
not
So,
majority of the cast isn't
yeah,
British. It's
yeah.
just Chiwetel.
Chiwetel
Well,
Ejiofor.
Benedict and
Yeah, yeah, oh, but there's, I'm talking
and,
about
and
like mostly
Michael.
The African American cast.
The majority of them are African.
Yeah,
I mean, Lupita is what Mexican and
Mexican,
Nigerian, so
yeah,
she's a whole different thing.
different perspective there. But no,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I see the whole in terms of anybody should be able to tell any kind of story they really want to.
Yeah.
And
What do you feel as far as like Sam Jackson's comments though?
I mean, I get
Specifically with taking American parts.
I mean, I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, I don't think you're taking any parts from anybody. I think if you can act, you can act, and I think that I think as long as you're playing something general, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of the problem with this whole idea of being so specific with representation, right? I mean, if you really want to get to the nitty gritty of it, speaking on Black Panther, should an American Chadwick Boseman be playing an African king when he's, he might have been in Africa, sure, at some point, but he is not African, but Wakanda is a fictional country, so does that really constitute you're not going to cast a Wakandian, right? So I mean, there's different levels, I guess, to it. To me, I kind of fall more on the side of let the actors be the actors, as long as they're playing, as long as the casting is respectable enough to understand, like not whitewashing or not putting on blackface and all that kind of stuff. But I think to specifically towards Samuel Jackson's comments, I pretty much disagree with the whole idea of like, oh, British actors are taking American parts. But I do see the other side of it though, right? I do see how some people can be upset by the fact that somebody who's not American taking on distinctly American parts, particularly in something like 12 Years a Slave. I think Get Out's a little different. He was commenting on Get Out.
He was talking about Get Out.
I think that's stupid to comment on Get Out like that, because I think the whole interracial thing is universal.
Yeah, well, that's my issue too. Is like my issue. I already said it, but I feel like putting up boundaries and borders, and you're not black unless you do this, or you're not Latino unless you blah blah blah, and you speak at least 5-minute conversation of Spanish, and like I feel like you get a little muddy when you muddy the waters so much, and you get so obsessed with the details and saying, well, he's black, but he's British, so get away. Only the African Americans can be over here, and then the black British over there, and then the black Latinos. I don't even know what you guys are. Like when you start doing that, I feel like you start to limit your ability to connect on just a racial issue in general, or a racial aspect or racial community in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, whether you're black British or black American or Afro Latino or Afro Latina, it's all relatively like the same plight. You're ultimately witnessing the same level of discrimination no matter where you are because of your skin color. And even, I mean, shit, even in a lot of people may make Canada out to be like this great progressive place, but I've heard people talk about how the racial disparities in like Canada or like we brought England, where that is kind of known as a racial place. Even Idris Elba made comments about that too. It's just when we're talking about Afro Latinas in South America. I think Brazil was the largest slave region for the longest time, even way bigger than America. And there's still a lot of parts of the country that still are dealing with slavery to this day. In fact, I think there's more slavery now than any other point in American or any other point in history now, today. So I think that should be a focus that people address and take credence to. But yeah, I mean, in terms of representation, I'm glad to see that a movie like 12 Years a Slave can have such a wider Oscar push and approach. Maybe not because it's British, and maybe not because it's dealing with freedom, but because it's also just like an excellent movie too. I think that's the biggest part of it for me is like we're celebrating a movie like that because it has great, legitimately like great filmmaking within, was particularly with Steve McQueen being the artist that he is. And particularly in speaking on 12 years, the detail to attention and portraying how slavery is both brutal, but also how it, from the other perspective, it could be like largely ignored and like not seen as an important issue. I mean, there's a whole segment in the movie where Chiwetel's character Solomon, where while he's free, he's shopping with his wife, and then a slave like wanders in, and then his master's like, "Come on, boy, what are you doing? Get out of here!" And he says nothing. He's silent in that moment because he doesn't understand the same exact plight that a slave would go through. But now that he's experiencing that. That scene almost kind of comes back in a way where when he's leaving and Lupita's character Patsy is like left behind, and he kind of has. But from that, he learns that what slavery ultimately is and what it means. So
yeah, absolutely,
it's really tough.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on kind of going back on it. What do you think of Benedict's character and the fact that he's like kind of like the nice slave owner, the nice plantation owner who's like. He's a plantation owner. He buys slaves, but at least he's kind of a cool guy.
Yeah.
What do you think of his character and the use of his character?
Yeah.
I mean, because those people actually existed though. Like that was real. There was actually plantation owners who would like you meet. Is it Angela Bassett or who?
No, I know who you're talking about. She was in Civil War.
Yeah. I forget her name, but
yeah,
when you meet her
remember
character
exactly.
and she talks about like, hey, I have the hookup.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in the house, I'm chilling. They treat me nice because I'm pretty. Like that happened when slavery was going on. Like that was a common thing where they would find like the pretty cool ones, and they would like bring him in the house and treat him like family and treat him nice, essentially, right?
No.
Nice for being property, right? It's still
Right.
disgusting and it's still inhuman, but it's one of those things that there was like different levels of different plantation owners. Someone like a Benedict and someone like a Michael Fassbender who just hated them and wanted to beat them up every day.
Right. No, I mean, to me, the Benedict's character almost kind of represents how morally, I guess, ambiguous the slave trade was, because at the same time, you want to root for him because he's being nice, but at the same time, he still owns slaves.
He still owns slaves.
He's still not doing anything to benefit these people. And even when Solomon tries to explain him his story, he's not trying to hear that because he paid money for having him there. And I think that. I mean, again, I think it plays to a larger theme of this movie. I think one of the big themes of this movie is how religion and the Bible thumping is used as justification for slavery, and that's kind of what Benedict's character comes down to. He keeps pounding the Bible into his slave's head, believing that believing that motivates them to and justifies their slavery and being stuck in that environment
And being
beaten,
submissive,
and being
too.
submissive. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's where his character, even though he's shown as like a decent man, he's still not really participating in decent activities. In fact, he's probably doing just as much work as Michael Fassbender character is, just in a different way.
Yeah, I love that moment too when Solomon talks to, I forget her character's name, but the lady who lost her family in the beginning.
Oh, Eliza.
And
Yeah.
when she tells him, she's like, you look at that guy like he's some sort of good guy. He's still freaking separated families and bought slaves. He's still a slave owner. He
Right.
doesn't care about you. You're just cool property that he bought. He's
Right.
like a really cool product that he thinks you're like cool because it's something that he bought.
Right.
But he still doesn't care about you.
By the way, I gotta say, man, watching this movie and watching it again for this podcast, seeing Paul Giamatti in it, man.
That's right.
That guy's like a childhood hero of mine.
Yeah.
He's a childhood hero of mine. And seeing him throw around the N-word like it was a dirty rag, it hurt. It hurt. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of actors say it, in a lot of movies, but for me, Paul Giamatti, what was that, Big Fat Liar?
Yep.
Oh man, that was my movie as a kid.
Yeah.
Seeing that, I was like, this hurts.
Did you? This is no. I'm not gonna even say this.
Wait, no, go ahead.
Because I feel like I'm open to say stuff. But do you feel like a certain way when certain actors say it, and do they say it different ways in order, as far as their characters?
Yeah, you can tell when actors aren't comfortable with saying it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's kind of what I meant.
Yeah,
They're like. They like whisper it and stuff, or they're like they don't pronounce certain aspects of the word, like the R or the A. Or,
yeah.
Like, is there some? Did you notice that in this movie?
Brad Pitt had like the hardest time. That was the first thing I noticed when his character. He's like, oh, I don't want to say it here, but like,
you can say whatever you want.
Yeah, but he had a super hard. I think he had a super hard time saying it. And I think it's funny. I think. Leo and Django.
Leo, yeah.
Yeah, he some parts you could tell he had a hard time, but then like when he
got comfortable.
Yeah, when he got comfortable, when he had like those violent, like that scene where in we're not talking about Tarantino now, but that scene where he breaks the glass in his hand. Like I think at that point it's like convincing, and it starts to become more and more convincing to a point, but yeah, you could definitely tell when actors, and I think I think Paul Giamatti, even though he's like saying it a lot, I think he's even a little uncomfortable saying it too. And I'm like,
who's the most comfortable saying?
Oh, Fassbender is definitely comfortable.
He said it the most.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He said it out of the white characters. He said it the most.
Oh yeah. Without a
doubt. Out of any characters, I think he said it the most.
Oh yeah. No, dude, absolutely. And he definitely. But I think that also
Sarah Paulson's in this movie.
Sarah Paulson.
Shout out to Sarah Paulson. My love, my life.
Oh, that hurts too. She was so racist in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, she was so
Sarah
racist.
Paulson's my girl, man. I love her.
She was so bad, but then she is also. I mean, I love her for American Horror Story, obviously, and the OJ. Yeah. But she was really violent in this movie. There's not really a lot of like white allies in this film that you'll see in a lot of cases.
Brad Pitt
definitely, but he's I mean, that's...
What do you think of that Brad Pitt, who's the producer of this movie, by the way, Plan B Productions? What do you think that... And a lot of credit to him, too. Yeah. But what do you think that he put himself as, like, if I'm going to play any character, it's the character that saves the black people.
I saved the day.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think that's kind of funny. I didn't even...
Because there was a lot of criticism. Remember that when that came out? It's like, of course, Brad Pitt has to play the white guy who saves the black people.
The hero at the end.
Yeah.
I didn't even... Watching it both times I saw it, the first time I didn't even know he was in the movie. He just showed up. Second time, like rewatching it here, I was like, "Whoa, he's in this movie!" Yeah. And then just immediately like all came back. Like, wow, oh yeah, he definitely is
kind of like the white
savior.
Yeah.
But I mean, hey, listen, he got the movie made, so I'm not gonna be too mad. You know what I mean? Like, film got made and won Best Picture. Let's celebrate that.
Yeah.
But I definitely do think it's a little like crazy and out of pocket that he cast himself as that part in particular. But, I think it's also, and again, maybe it's like the least amount of times the N word was said by a white character in this movie.
Yep.
So it's like, all right, let me just take this part. Because didn't he adopt like a bunch of like African children too? Like
I think he did.
Yeah. So you got to put something on for the kids. I think this movie overall though is brilliant. I think all the performances make a lot of sense in the sense that you get the contrast between like pain and sorrow, but also some of them more humanistic moments. I shouldn't say lighter, more humanistic moments, particularly between Chiwetel and Lupita. Early on in the film, not early on, like later on in the film, they have some good back and forth in their conversations. It's still like dark and dreary, but it's more showing like the side of slavery that a lot of people don't talk about, is like how it was so bad for Lupita's character. She just wanted him to kill her, and he couldn't confront that kind of pain and sorrow within himself. It's just crazy how that.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about that too because I rewatched this movie as well, and thinking about the women slavery. How it kind of was worse for the women.
Yeah,
because you could say like, man, I was beat to death and I was beat until blah 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 picking cotton, and she's like, yeah, I was beat and raped. It's like shit. That's worse.
Yeah,
because it's like. You get the beating with the whips and all that, but you also get raped, which is disgusting and awful and horrible. And I mean, it's not that the men weren't raped either. They probably were.
Yeah.
But the women were probably raped more often. And that's kind of just like awful. And that's why she was the hardest working one of them all, because she just didn't want to be raped anymore by Michael Fassbender. Remember that, when she would pick more
She did
cotton
like
out of
500
anyone?
pounds a time.
500 pounds,
Yeah.
which was more than any man, because she just felt more desperate than any man, because she just didn't want to be raped. And it's just awful thinking
Yeah.
about that. It's just like,
Yeah.
holy shit. And her performance, because I was rewatching it, because she won the Oscar for this, and rewatching it, you're like, yeah, she definitely deserved that Oscar.
Yeah.
Specifically for a few scenes towards the end. But you're just like, damn, it's hard. It's definitely hard to watch. It's definitely hard to watch.
And I think going into the character psychology of like the Michael Fassbender character, who is a dude who is agonizing for control. And that's why he cares so much about Patsy being his slave. That like because he has nothing but control over her. Whereas his sister, played by Sarah Paulson, is very, very controlling of him, very authoritative, and tells him exactly what to do. I'll beat this slave. I'll do this, do that. And he feels like he's under her thumb. So the fact that he has a lot of black people under his thumb is what satisfies him on a character level. I think that's the same with a lot of the characters we see in this movie. With Paul Dano, or is it Paul Dano?
Paul Dano,
yeah, his character has the same kind of control issue as well. And I think that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what a lot of slavery is just people who are hunting for control and who feel like oppressed under their slave or under their southern thumbs of all that kind of stuff.
But there was also the aspect of like the Bible thumping too from Michael Fassbender character, assuming that it was like, this is biblical stuff that we're doing. We're doing the Lord's work by making slaves and by making them submit to us, is kind of the whole thing.
Right. No, I think that's the biggest aspect of it, and how taking the Bible out of context is and using that to motivate such a deadly sin. And even Chiwetel even says that as much in this movie, is like he calls him out for it, like, one day you're going to pay for all these sins. Like, there's no sin, because what he believes is doing is according to the Bible. But I mean, at the end of the day, the brutality of what we see in this movie, I think, is the biggest part of it. I think using all like the super long takes that they use throughout this film really
and that's all Steve McQueen too.
Yeah.
The one that stands out the most, obviously, is when he's being hung.
Yeah,
and it's just a shot of him just freaking struggling to freaking survive for the next like 5 minutes or whatever till when his master gets there.
Right.
And it's just like, you're like, this is insane. But that's kind of the genius of Steve McQueen and of his long takes, that he did in Hunger and in Shame, and now in 12 Years a Slave, that it really stands out, and you really see that too. Also, I want to make a quick comment on the score. The score, specifically the ship scene. It's like a horror movie score.
Yeah.
It's literally like don 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 don, and it's like they're going to their death, kind of, and they're literally in a horror movie when the ship scene is happening, when he's sailing to the south.
Right.
I don't know if you noticed that too. Rewatching it.
Yeah. No, I mean, the super intense like camera angles they use there too. Yeah, the way it's like framed definitely makes the ongoing fear of like terror and like you said, horror for these individuals involved is really heartbreaking. And I think particularly in the scene where Lupita is getting like whipped at the end of the film. That's another long take too. By the way. I didn't even know it was a long take when I first saw it.
That was probably the hardest to watch, dude.
Yeah. Because the lack of music there, but like the subtle, it was almost kind of like musicality to the way the whip was being like being hit, and like how that sound effect, and the sound effects in this movie sometimes are so overwhelming. You talk about that boat scene, how the propellers like, and the whips, the way the whips are used and everything is just like using the sounds to emphasize like this implied violence, and just hitting you harder and harder each time is mind blowing to me.
Yeah, it really is a commentary too on how it's crazy how relevant and how intense slavery was in the South. Like the South is just obviously. I mean, I don't know too much of the South as far as like living there, because I've never lived there besides Texas. But I live more border town, which is different. But how deeply ingrained racism was in there in that area. I mean, the fact that even when slavery was done, how much, how, how like behind they were when it comes to like certain racial issues.
How behind they still are.
How behind they still are till
in a
this
lot of
day.
cases, yeah.
I mean, till this day, like Alabama and Georgia and Florida, and shout out to all you guys. I love you guys. Obviously they're great states, but how difficult times
Some
were.
individuals in those
Yeah,
states,
some individuals in those states had a difficult time because of so much heritage and history that comes from slavery and how their parents and their grandparents' parents and all this stuff were slave owners and stuff. And it just so ingrained in there to the point of like, it's crazy. It's just absolutely insane. That
Yeah.
to me really, really stands out for sure. And I was going to say something else about this movie, but I forgot. So you can comment on what I just said.
Oh, no. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. And I think that even the people who don't appear to be racist are kind of racist in this movie as well. I mean, the whole scene where he's like captured and held in that cell and then pans up is like the White House in the background. Just, it's like a great metaphor for like how our government and how our systems kind of take a blind eye to the bigger social inequalities and injustices happening in our country. So
Yeah, I just remember what I was going to say.
Oh, what's
I
that?
was going to say the thing that kind of kills me in this movie too is like you said at the end when he says bye to Patsy.
Yeah.
And when you feel this intense need of like, can you free them too, please?
Yeah,
Like you're just going to leave him there?
Yeah.
Because it really has, but he can't do anything about it. Like he
Yeah.
legitimately can't do anything.
That's like the scene earlier in the movie with Clemens when he was leaving, and Solomon was like trying to call out to his name, like don't leave, like Solomon, like Clemens, help me.
Yeah.
But again,
It's like literally he can't do anything.
Yeah.
Because you feel like, wait a minute, we've had this relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and you see how much I'm suffering, and really, it's like
Right.
you're gonna leave me hanging. But obviously he can't do anything. But that's how I felt. Or at least like, are we gonna see like? Obviously this is me. I rewatched this movie a couple days ago, but I was like, are we gonna see like freaking Solomon come back with like 2 pistols and start like blasting people left and right like Jenga, and it's like just and I was like,
Right.
can we please see that, please, so Michael
Right.
Fassbender can get his due, because he's got what's coming to him, right? I mean, can we have Django show up
Right,
and take
right.
out Michael Fassbender, please?
Right.
Like that's what I was thinking watching this movie, because I
Yeah.
was like, man, you kind of get no justice.
There is
and
no
even,
justice.
even at the end when they
There's
say
like
like
the end
the
cards, yeah.
guys got off free, because there's no justice. Like even at this point. There was the only semi-justice they got was that he got what he was initially due,
Yeah.
which was his freedom.
Yeah, and he got 12 years taken away from him.
Yeah,
because of
for
that.
no reason.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
to me, it's just devastating because you really want to see justice. You want to see people get their due. You want to see Fassbender go out. You want to see all the slaves freed, and you don't get that in this movie. You
Right.
just don't get it because it just didn't happen. That's not the kind of stuff you would see.
Right,
And that's
right.
just devastating because as someone who wants to see that, you're just like, damn it. I wanted to see Django show up out of nowhere. He just comes riding in a horse and shooting people.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. That's the last word I had to say, because to me, it's like at the end of the day, and you see this guy get his freedom back, you're just still like bitter because
Yeah.
you just didn't see justice done.
Yeah, no, I think this movie's marvelous. I think this is one of the best ways that you could tell this kind of story. I know in the beginning I seemed like I was hating. I don't know why I started off like with
Hater?
yeah, I don't know why I started off hating.
Why you
I
gotta
was
be a
little
hater
bit-
every 3?
I think I just had those points and I was like, let me say this first. But I
Yeah.
don't know why. But no, I think that's definitely I think it's definitely one of the best, and I think that having the perspective of it being a British director or whatever, British actors, whatever, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I think as long as you get a story that impacts people and it can draw in all the kind of audiences that it draws in, while still being this heart-wrenching, true to form portrayal of slavery,
Yeah.
is impactful, no doubt. And I think that overall the cast, I mean, Jesus, how'd they get like Benedict Cumberbatch, Paul Giamatti, Brad Pitt, Chiwetel, obviously, Mike Fassbender, Lupita Nyong'o, Sarah Paulson, like all big stars.
They are. Paul Dano,
yeah.
even Paul
Dano,
Dano.
yeah.
Paul Dano's pretty big.
Yeah, but I think they shot this movie, I think, in like 16 days, and
That's
it was
crazy.
like one camera in like Louisiana. And I think they really do get a good sense of like place and feel and atmosphere throughout. So
Yeah.
I think
It's still a very raw and gritty movie where it feels very real.
Right. No, without a doubt. So, yeah, I'm glad this movie, and it was very close to being the first director to win best first African American director to win best director, but
Yeah.
it didn't get there yet.
No.
Moonlight didn't get it either. That was close to. But maybe one of these days, maybe Get Out be the changer for Jordan Peele.
Maybe.
Yeah, but
I think Del Toro's kind of had it in the bag.
Yeah. But maybe, well, hopefully soon we'll get director.
I still think again. I already made this prediction, but I'll say it again. Get Out's gonna win Best Picture. And I know that's whoa, and I know I get it. It's a crazy prediction, but I still feel it. I still feel like it might happen, and I think it will happen. So
okay, hey,
we'll see.
All right,
we'll see, and that'll be an Oscar for Jason Blum.
Jason Blum winning Oscar. Imagine that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's pretty crazy. No, I'd be more than happy. I knew somebody in my school who interned for Blumhouse. Yeah. And they loved it. So
there you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. That was our podcast on Steve McQueen. Make sure you guys leave a comment, support us, share. Please share this video if you liked it.
The most politically edgy podcast, I think, on the SK Plus network.
Hey, man. The hottest, the biggest show on the SK Plus. Not the biggest show? Okay. But still, we bring the most fire out of anybody. Maybe. I don't know. We'll have to listen to everyone else.
Oh, yeah, definitely. No, I think we definitely have the young woke sense of that.
It's not woke, it's woke.
I think we're woke individuals, and I think we bring good perspective to our show.
Hey, man. So make sure you guys support, share, comment, like, subscribe. Everything else, guys, support us. I'm at Squad Leader Ace.
It's RB3 Schmoes.
So support us on Twitter and on Instagram and all that. We're going to be posting more stuff for you guys, and we appreciate you guys. We support you guys, and we are peacing out. And that was it for the Meaning Of podcast.